Welcome to Beyond Bitcoin, a podcast about all things digital assets, the global communities they are creating, the generations that are using and investing in them, and the challenges faced by the nations that are seeking to regulate them. The content of this program is not to be taken as investment advice. My name is Derek Graham. I'm the CEO of Portal Asset Management, and my co-host is Nitin Gower, Director of IBM Digital Assets and CTO of Portal. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome along to Beyond Bitcoin. As normal, I am here with my co-host and friend, Nitin Gower. Hello, Nitin.
Hey, Derek, how are you?
Excellent indeed, mate. So another episode on a series relating to non-fungible tokens. And, people have asked me a couple of times, why are we doing non-fungible tokens in such a large way and discussing them? And the reason is because I think it's one of the most tectonic technologies that this space is presenting. And the reason why is that it could dramatically change the way assets are validated, financed, and exchanged, and the way communities are gathered, function, and flourish. The impact of NFTs and how they bridge the world between TradFi and DeFi, and what roles they will play in the metaverse is just starting to play out. I think we're at the very beginning of this realm, and this bridge that it's going to create between the realm that we're existing in, between the metaverse, is going to be very substantial. But the challenge is, in many cases, how do you create it and how do you make it user-friendly? Well, we have a guest along today who I'd like Nitin to introduce, who has that problem resolved. Over to you, Nitin.
Thank you, Derek. And before I go to introduce one of my favorite people in the world, a few things. It's interesting that this week alone, I had about 16 calls. This is the enterprise world that I live in, which doesn't really understand metaverse and doesn't really understand NFTs. Suddenly I had titles that I dealt with who had head of metaverse. And I was like, what the hell's going on? And so I went to look into the enterprise consumption of it and some numbers just to give, put a context before I introduce Charu to this conversation. For Dune Analytics, $14.6 billion OpenSea's total sales volume for 2021. 3.74 billion of Axie Infinity last year. Of course, it's changed a lot since last December, but it's still a sizable number. And then you have about 91 million plus for PAC's Merge Open Edition sales record. And PAC made history with their final Nifty Gateway drop. Some amazing numbers, right? And 6,000 board API clubs, unique holders, so that number has exponentially gone up. 4,200 highest CryptoPunk sale in 2021 in ETH. So that brings to this question. You have the apes, the punks, and the axies. What the hell's going on? And to make the sense of it all, join me in welcoming Charu Sethi. She is as close to NFT ecosystem as one can be. A good friend of mine from IBM days, and she really took the NFT and ran with it. And I remember she was having this rapid fire calls with me, and she just kept on jumping ship till she found something she really wanted to do. And that's why I say she took the NFT and ran with it. And I guess never looked back. Charu, it's been a few years, I guess. So Charu, thank you for your time and expertise. Share with us your journey and how you see this landscape evolving.
Thank you, Nitin. Thank you for that introduction. And yes, indeed, I did. My journey started with bugging you over calls. I want to do something in NFTs, or not NFTs, essentially back then, but when blockchain. What do I do? Where do I go? I tried. I did spend some time leading the blockchain marketing role for Asia Pacific in IBM, and after that, I never wanted to go back to doing anything else. So constant conversations with Nitin, what's happening? Where do I go? Where do I start? But in 2021, I decided to take that leap of faith, moved out of IBM, worked at Engine for some time. And of course, that's when all the NFT, the movement had started, big celebrities getting into it. And it was just the start. And the numbers that you're talking about now, Nitin, I mean, back then wasn't anywhere close to that. Sure. And it still felt like, my gosh, this is crazy. I mean, we've come really far. And I was, and then I came across this opportunity to work with Unique Network. Unique Network is the NFT chain for the Polkadot and Kusama ecosystem. Yeah. We are the B2B sort of the infrastructure and middleware provider for building NFT marketplaces and ecosystems. And that I really I like that idea, because coming from an enterprise background, I saw that there's just so much stuff we can do here. And I found this opportunity really exciting to start from scratch, grow the mission, grow the community, build a community, which I had never done before. The B2C angle I'd never experienced before. And I remember in the early days, I would track every comment, every emotion from every the community member, and it would really drive me crazy. But then I thought, okay, let's not stress like this. Let's have a plan around it. But I think over the last year, we have, as a team at Unique Network, we've spoken to about over 100 projects. And wow. It's just amazing the kind of ideas we are exposed to and the stuff that people want to do. Of course, there is no doubt an element that I'm an artist and I want to make quick money. I want to make my own marketplace and I want to go with it. And it doesn't work like that many times. So, but essentially, I think after speaking with the projects and all these ideas, we've sort of realized that there's a lot it takes for NFT marketplace or ecosystem, or for that matter, metaverse, which is sort of on steroids. It takes a lot for them to be successful. And what does the end-to-end success look like? So I think the conversation has moved beyond, certainly beyond digital collectibles, where you just buy, make an NFT, mint it, invest in marketing and branding, and just sell it for the first time. So the conversation is moving beyond that. And what you said about Axie Infinity and Bored Ape Yacht Club, those two examples I really like. So I think, there is, I'll pause here. I can go on and on otherwise.
No, that's fantastic. So help me understand two things, right? One is, you are at Engine, which is a gaming, and gaming and metaverse has so much synergy between the true sense of metaverse, which is taking this and taking to a game and moving from one game to another game. And there's a whole element of economics built into it. And moving from Engine to this B2B platform, which, as you mentioned, coming from IBM, you have the experience with enterprise element. What's fascinating to me in my preamble, as I mentioned, this week, I had like 8 different calls from unsuspecting enterprise customers. How do you see this dichotomy between the world that's meant to be self-sufficient and growing like wildfire and be all end all from a perspective of dealing with metaverse Web 3.0, suddenly you see B2B enterprise coming into play? Doesn't that sort of have a contradiction in its approach? So how do you equate the gaming world from Engine to Unique Network, which is sort of in many cases trying to thread that gap, I think?
Yeah, I think it's I see it as an evolution. And NFTs, we've talked about NFTs as a representation of art or in-game assets. But I think people are now starting to realize that the technology, the NFT as a technology, is capable of doing much more, provided we are able to create powerful NFTs. So people are now realizing that these are the real life digital assets of future. So, there have been conversations about real estate, NFTs, and that's a digital, if that asset is digitized or tokenized, that asset is supposed to do much more than just sit in a wallet, right? And that's how the real world assets are. They're connected with each other. They have relationships with each other. So I think the enterprise customers, even brands, and I wouldn't stretch it to large enterprises. I would just say the SME segment or small retail brands, they are realizing that there's a lot more, and beyond looking at NFTs as just NFTs and looking them at as real life assets and what can we do with them. So I think it's sort of an evolution. And even in gaming, it is, we've again talked a lot about moving your sword from one game to the other. That's great. But what Axie Infinity has done is amazing, and especially the evolution that they've gone through. I mean, they're constantly working on building the utility of the Axies and the SLP. And because if they don't do that, they have seen that the market price or the value of SLPs has been going down. So essentially, what can we keep doing to expand the utility or keep expanding the utility? And that's what the Bored Ape Yacht Club has also been constantly working on to go beyond collectibles.
That's fascinating. I think that's something which is, as we engage in token economic systems and understanding what is the formula for the continued engagement, because many of these things rise and they rise to the new heights and suddenly just flop till the next thing comes along. And that at many levels, if we do aspire to possess something of value, that becomes a little bit interesting on the long run, because if the value is short-lived, then the role of NFTs becomes short-lived from that perspective. And so in that case, as you mentioned, with enterprises and large corporations looking at NFT beyond a quick token and to make a quick buck and looking at longer term engagement, what's your perspective on Nike's sort of acquisition of Artifact? If you remember, Nike acquired a company that makes NFTs and sneakers in metaverse. Derek, can you believe that? I mean, you need to have an avatar, you need to buy shoes. Even in that metaverse, is not good enough buying shoes in the world we live in. And Nike.
Well, I can believe it very much because you've got a Nike shirt on with a great big tick on it. So
that's right.
I'm the Nike of the brand.
I'm the Nike supporter today, and I didn't realize I'm wearing their. We should probably get paid and have them sponsor us.
Oh no, the first sponsorship of Beyond Bitcoin.
But I just want to understand what is the thing there coming from the B2B world, and from as you begin to see this day in day out. Budweiser went and bought the Budweiser.eth. You begin to see some of these large corporations, including Visa, spending $230,000 for NFT. What's going on?
All right, I think this is for various reasons, right? All brands they obviously have a vision in mind, which may or may not be very clear to begin with. But I guess they are, to begin with, they are doing what makes sense, right? Acquisition of companies that are building digital assets, or acquisition of a punk. That could have been mainly a marketing tactic, which I would say was a very strong marketing tactic. And so the exact objective could be different. But I think what's needed from sort of an enterprise use case, or again, I'll just come back to a successful NFT ecosystem or a marketplace, or any NFT concept that these brands may have. I would say that there are sort of 4 pillars to making sure that they make sort of a robust use case that can then be a good use case of financialization, right? So I think now I wouldn't pick on specific examples, but the 4 pillars, one of them is how powerful can NFTs be, right? And going back to the concept of real world, relationships that assets have, bringing those to NFTs. So what is needed, right? I mean, fractionalization is now pretty common with Beeple's B20 index, and that's interesting, even though the price has tanked significantly. But so fractionalization is great, but to be able to make it fungible and then turn back that into NFT requires something called RFT, or refungibility of a token, right? Wow. And that also requires, that also gives a rise to the idea of bundling a fungible token with something non-fungible. So fractionalization, refractionalization, and bundling. So all of these three concepts put together can really create NFTs that are nested, that are composable, and then you can do a lot more with those digital assets, right? Like something uh, like, for example, a membership, right? Very simple. As a membership token, you can build in the benefits. It can still have a monetary value, and it can have within that membership some NFTs, right? So it's sort of a complex or nested or a composable NFT, right? So that's a sort of one part of that's one pillar making NFTs really powerful. The second is protocol related, and that's something we wouldn't. I mean, you've talked enough about scalability in your previous show, so essentially, what are the design choices you make so that it's scalable and it's interoperable? In the context of any brand that is building their metaverse or their marketplace, I think the very essential thing for them is market access. Can they access different marketplaces, different communities across different chains, right? So there is, we have been working with a partner called XP Network to build sort of chain agnostic NFT marketplaces. And we hope, we're pretty sure if once that's done, it'll be very valuable for anyone building on our platform. And then, Nitin, to what you said around economic models and community building, what we've seen with these evolving and growing NFT ecosystems is they've started to incentivize more and more roles and more jobs within that community. I think that's really key to involve people. And the last pillar is end user experience. Now, when Nike is doing something, they don't want their audience to first go learn a MetaMask or a crypto wallet, or for that matter, Polkadot.js. Hell no. Polkadot is amazing. I love it, of course, but the interface of the wallet is, it's not the most user friendly. So what do you do to take that off, right? And one of the things that we've been working on is sponsoring the fee for the end user. And how that works is the developer can sponsor the transaction fee for the end user, which means, and it has huge applications in gaming, which allows for freemium gaming, a tried and tested model in the gaming industry, so that the gamers can just come and play for free until they are hooked on to the game, till they're ready to invest and spend money on assets. All that transaction fee is sponsored. And that's because we are building on Substrate. It's a really flexible framework. It allows for us to create those things. So I think that's a part of breaking down. That's the pillar about breaking down the access barriers. I'll stop here. So I don't know, we just went into a little bit of a different direction, but 4 pillars is what we say, yeah.
So one of the things is that, the barrier to entry still exists. And that is for a novice that's not understanding this space. The areas of, having wallets is an early challenge for them. Actually minting an NFT, gosh, what does that mean? How do I mint an NFT? Which site do I go to do that? These barriers to entry really are a solution that needs to be resolved so that people can go, right, I'm an artist, I'm not a technologist, I want to be able to not just create and sell my piece of art, but I want to create my community. And I want my community to be engaged in what I do. And I want that community to reach out to other communities. Maybe take us through that journey of what an artist would have to do to, and your solution to resolve that problem, to learn about creating and minting an NFT and building a community.
Right, yeah. So I think there are 2 aspects to it. One is creating and minting the NFT, and then the community. So with regards to creating and minting an NFT, our tools, again, we've been very much focused on breaking down the access barriers. So our tools are designed in a way that the developers, first of all, they don't need to be blockchain developers. Any front-end UX UI developer can just, pick up our tools and run with it. So that's what we are resolving. And while, so we've already done that with basic minting, marketplace, gallery, wallet kind of capabilities. We are now on our journey to build some of those advanced features like RFTs, nested NFTs, composable NFTs, those kind of features in a very accessible way, even to the developers. From a community building perspective, I'd want to bring the element of financialization to some extent, right? So if the NFT ecosystem or a marketplace is built on those four pillars, which means you have all those powerful NFTs and scalability issues are resolved, interoperability is resolved. So financialization is easier because then you can introduce aspects like, I mean, in the Web 2.0 ecosystem, we've talked a lot about fintech-enabled marketplaces and how they've sort of turned around the whole Web 2.0 economy. So I think in terms of how the community gets involved is, first of all, they want to see that their role in that project or in that marketplace or that community is incentivized well. Right. And then, which really means that we want to incentivize storytellers. We want to incentivize anyone who's amplifying it. We want to incentivize anyone who's sort of adding value to the network. And that goes to the point of the concept of network effects, right? How valuable is your network is driven by how many nodes, valuable nodes are on it. So if you think about the community and your community members as contributing nodes, I think that's the thinking that's needed, that how do I engage and incentivize every community member, whether or not they are a buyer or a developer, right? So moving beyond those roles, I think that's where all projects would like to focus. It's not an easy thing to obtain, but achieve. But I think that is very key to the design point.
So I'd just love to get your perspective, Charu, where you just mentioned the whole element of the network effect, which is the entire sort of soul of this entire Web3 world is participation. And this is something which we discussed last time too. And I'm really behind on writing, on this topic where I think that the biggest limitation that you have in the entire ecosystem. So even though you have NFTs and you have the verticals, which is gaming and virtual worlds and sports and utilities and music and all that good stuff, it still relies upon the fundamentals. You have the layer 1, you have the layer 2 for scalability, you have storage mechanisms, and then you have these verticals, and I classify DeFi in the same verticals where you have this tokenized world evolving. And I feel that there's not enough attention, with exception of what's happening in Ethereum ecosystem and Polkadot ecosystem. There's not enough participation which will fuel the higher layers, right? Which is, there's not enough participation and people are just eager to buy these things using the fiat and banking rails and going after these sort of aggregators and platforms to say, let me just go and buy this token because that makes it a lot easier. And especially the NFT community, it relies upon content creators. It relies upon, as you mentioned, folks who are enriching the community with their contribution, whether it's fueling the interest or whether it's adding value to it in terms of creating content, consuming contents, adding new economic vectors to this space. And I feel that there's not enough of that happening, both in terms of the fact that you need a resounding infrastructure, which is the technical infrastructure to support it, but you have enough of content creators. Any of the NFT conferences, you hardly find a lot of technical people. You have this amazing artists who have these brilliant ideas. So I find that to be a gap, the gap between the artist community and the creators want to do amazing things, but there's not enough infrastructure to support that level of creativity and the velocity of that creativity coming into the system. I don't know if you have observed the same thing, but that's something which I have consistently observed, which is why, every time the markets go down, the value of crypto is tied to this whole thing because of the fact that it's just tied to the banking system, as opposed to completely divorcing ourselves and saying, let's completely build this from scratch. I don't know if that question would make sense, but I just want to get your thoughts.
Yeah, and I think you're right. So while there is there is enough creativity, that's coming for artists, and they're creating beautiful art pieces. But I think there is not enough thought given from a technical perspective as to how can we use these assets, or how can we use the representation or the token of these assets to add more utility and value to it. And I think most projects that we see, even who we speak to, they are also struggling from the same challenge. They put in a lot of branding and marketing for their first drop, and they do, they have maybe a moderately successful sale, but what happens after that? And that's not something that an artist can tackle, or an art community can tackle, right? I think there is still a lot of thought and work that needs to go into bringing together something like what we are building, powerful NFTs with advanced features, and how do we conceptually use that on an art piece? How do we, within gaming, it's easier, it's slightly easier, because then you can define roles of digital assets and NFTs, and you can grow those roles, exactly what Axie Infinity has been doing. But in the art world, it becomes a bit hard as to how do you create that secondary market and the demand in the secondary market, right? And for that, the one thing that we are attempting is partnering with different services like NFT staking services, NFT collateralization of NFTs. So different projects that are offering these services, we try and make those available or integrate those with our platform and make that available to the artist community. And that's something we've not achieved. That's something we are working towards. We'd like to achieve, but it is true that there is that true gap in creating that end-to-end ecosystem that is that leads to sort of max financialization and max output for the communities involved. So yeah, there is no real answer to it, but that's an observation.
No, that's a great dissection. And I think, Derek, we should probably make a note to have this entire conversation on financialization of NFTs. It deserves a whole separate hour to this conversation, because it's convergent. To me, that's true metaverse, is ability for us to be able to, financialize these things and be able to exchange for the tokens. But I'll pause here. Derek?
Yeah. Well, look, as I've said before, I think this is one of the most tectonic sections of the world of blockchain-based technologies. But one thing it has, two things it has that are consistent with the remainder of the blockchain-generated technologies, and that is it has decentralization, and also it has community involved with that process. And the decentralization gives the opportunity to disintermediate the owners of the communication with the artists. And this, I think, is terribly important. The sort of the rent takers that sit in between, the art galleries that sit there and own the list of people that come in to look at the art, take 30% of the commission on the way through when the artist is being able to present his art, his or her art, and also the ability to build communities. So if there's an ability here to be able to create smart contract driven communities that are generating tokens, that are engaging, as you say, and incentivizing community members to build the opportunity of being involved with that artist, I think it's extraordinary. And I can also confirm that I've had a very interesting conversation with one of the very large art galleries in Australia. And they found NFTs to be the most exciting conversation he's had for 2 years when I spoke with him about it. Because just think for a moment, the ability to turn around and say, here's a piece of art that's sitting in the gallery, but 50% of it's owned by the public and the other 50% is owned by us. And not only that, but our art gallery endorses it. So we love the community that's following it, and we support that community that's following it. And so you're seeing this convergence from art gallery hung art to communities driven by technology. It's an incredibly exciting space. I think you're in an amazing spot. And we are going to do more on this space, because the confluence between TradFi and DeFi is going to exist. the digitization of assets that we see all around us will exist, and how we transact and how we deal with those will exist. Again, I think I have to say, are we not at the beginning of the beginnings here, Charu?
Yes, we are. Oh, yes, we are. And it's, going back to the point of all the stats you mentioned, Nitin, and 1 year before that, we felt that, oh, that's the beginning. And we still feel, oh, this is the beginning. So definitely it is the beginning. And I think your point about there's so many new things that we have experienced, and your point about bringing together the communities, we had a really, sorry for a tangent there, but we had a really beautiful experience with our partnership called Digital Art for Climate, and that's a partnership with UN Habitat and IAI Cloture. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of climate-inspired art, which we will be launching as a marketplace soon. Right. It was also displayed in COP26. The winning artist is from the Philippines, and his name is Brick. And I'll share that with you later, Nitin. It's a beautiful piece of art. Fantastic. And it's totally inspired by his own experience of a natural disaster in the Philippines. And it was, that piece of art and his participation in this, it brought together the entire Philippines community, and he became like a national star. He was on CNN Philippines, and so I think there is just so much good that can come out of it. We are really just at the beginning of it.
Right. So talk about beginnings, and you've been through a few of them now, as you know, in past 2 or 3 years that you've been at like few beginnings. Looking at the lens in future, Charu, where do you see this going in the next 1, 3, and 5 years? In the sense that from your vantage point and you're up close and personal to the industry, what's your prediction?
Yeah, okay. All right. So in terms of prediction, I do see a lot of value being unlocked by this confluence of DeFi and NFT. The NFT technology is not there yet, and once there is, I think the value unlock we will see will be immense, and that will sort of trigger the next rise. That's what I think. And these are not long-term predictions; these could happen very soon. the other thing I see is again very important is we'll see the access barriers being broken down even more, because there is sort of this inherent push towards a mainstream adoption. Everyone wants to, all brands, it's sort of in everyone's interest to take this to mainstream, and we'll see that happen a lot more in different ways. Now, ideally, everything, all these projects should be totally 100% decentralized. They should be 100% interoperable, 100% scalable. We may not achieve all of that. That's very hard. But I think in terms of the mainstream adoption is what we will see. A lot of brands are already jumping in, and people will be buying or investing in NFTs without knowing that they're really buying the NFT. So it's just an asset. That's those are the top 2 or 3 things that I see will really shape the next wave, and particularly around DeFi. That's something I feel is.
No, that's brilliant. And in aspiration of getting another sponsor, I'm hoping Oban issues an NFT, Derek, which will be very beneficial for some of us who are Scotch drinkers. But Charu, this was fantastic. And I think we should leave the audience high and dry, because we have another follow-on that we should do, which explores a bit more on sort of unpacking a lot of things that you have discussed with us. So thank you for your time, Derek.
Thank you. Really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much, Derek. Thank you so much, Nitin.
You're most welcome. Now, Charu, one of the great things that our audience is lucky to have, and that is often have access to our speakers. And so if someone wants to connect with you, how might be the best way to do that?
LinkedIn is great. Twitter is good as well.
Yep. And so it's so the correct spelling of your name, Charu, and then Sethi, so that they can find you on LinkedIn. And by all means, reach out and communicate, because that's part of what our community generates on the way through. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, and look forward to having you on again along the way as this industry continues to grow in ways that I don't think we can even imagine right now. Thanks very much.
Cool.
Thank you both.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed our weekly conversation. If you have any questions, comments, or suggested topics, please feel free to connect with either Nitin or myself on nitin@portal.am or derek@portal.am. Feel free to subscribe and share with like-minded friends. Stay well, inquisitive, and engaged. See you next week. Bye for now.